Wesley, Willett, and Wendy, Mackay. And today we'll be talking about patterns of physical design remixing on online maker communities. So when we talk about remixing culture, we tend to think about remixing music or images, digital assets. But this happens physically as well. So when building with Legos, we can follow instructions or we can modify and adapt them. We also have computer-aided design tools that let us create digital representations of physically buildable objects. So thanks to online communities and digital design files, remixing physical media starts to resemble remixing of digital media. So Chris Anderson talks about the effect of remixing in online maker communities in his book Makers, and he highlights the promise of remixing in online communities. So he points out that remixing will invite more people to participate since community members no longer need to make whole contributions from scratch, and instead they can participate in the collaborative improvement of existing ideas or designs. But we can dig deeper into this premise. The maker movement has been around for a while now, and there are established maker communities online where remixing is happening. So in this talk, I will present a mixed methods study of people's remixing behavior on Thingiverse, which is arguably the largest 3D printing community on the internet. It's a site where people post and share design files for others to create on their own. We're offering a community-scale exploration on how people remix each other's designs on this site. And from this, we identify opportunities to improve how online design communities and design tools can support physical remixing more effectively. So remixing is a reoccurring theme in qualitative studies of maker culture and DIY communities. So previous research into steampunk and IKEA hacking DIY communities have noted that its makers are not content to simply consume, but wish to customize, remix, and design for themselves, and that creative tools should celebrate skilled creative reuse and customization. Meanwhile, online maker community websites are offering basic features to support remixing. So for example, this IKEA hack, which creates a velocipede from 2 stools with the help of a few custom 3D printed parts, was posted for others to view and remix on Instructables and on Thingiverse. So we're going beyond these earlier qualitative studies by leveraging the remixing features that are on these online maker communities to look at how design adaptation occurs on a community scale. So how a community of makers is remixing each other's ideas. Other researchers have looked at remixing in digital content communities. So Cheliotis and Yu did a network analysis of CC Mixter, which is a music remixing site. We used many of the same methodological approaches to analyze our physical remixing network, and this also allows us to compare physical remixing against digital remixing communities. So we have 3 main research questions. The first on what remixing actually looks like on Thingiverse and how this compares to other electronic media. The second is on parametric design tools and how they influence authors' contributions to and participation in Thingiverse. And the third is considering the kinds of designs that are the most influential and how digital authoring and sharing tools might better foster remixing. So to address this question, we turn to Thingiverse. Out of curiosity, how many people here have gone to Thingiverse or checked out Thingiverse in the past? Excellent. For anyone who does not know Thingiverse, it was established in 2008 as an extension of MakerBot, which is a company that produces 3D printers for the home consumer market. So language will get a little confusing here. The basic unit of a post on Thingiverse is called a thing with a capital T. For example, this thing is a physical model of an atom. On a thing page, the author posts digital design files, fabrication instructions, and images of their final product. When an author creates a thing, they can add links to that thing to other things that were sources for their remix. So for example, this atom is actually a remix of another author's earlier gold atom model. It's very important to note that all remixing metadata is voluntarily posted by Thingiverse authors, and what constitutes a remix is being actively defined by Thingiverse authors. So there is no official policy or policing that controls for what is or is not the source of a remix. It's also important to note that each thing has a numeric thing ID that is assigned sequentially as new things are posted. This ID is also used in the thing's URL. In the paper, when we bring up examples, we use the thing ID so that you can look up the examples on your own. Given that it's MakerBot, unsurprisingly, there's a lot of digital designs for 3D printable objects, such as this handle that turns a jam jar into a mug. However, There are also designs for other types of digital fabrication. So for example, the 6-pack carrier is assembled from laser-cut parts, which are from 2D design files. And the vase design is created by laser etching 2D graphics onto an existing 3D object. So in January 2013, MakerBot added Customizer as a new feature to Thingiverse. Authors can post parametric design files to Customizer. So in these parametric designs, object properties such as height or thickness are variables that can be redefined to produce alternate designs. So other users can then come to Customizer, use the Customizer interface, and create a customized design. So let's look at an example. Turns out that our atom model is actually customizable. So we can go to the sidebar and click on Open in Customizer, which brings up the Customizer app. So here, we can use drop-down menus, slider bars, and other interface widgets to select which element we would like to create, which font we want to use, and adjust other physical parameters. Once we're ready, we can click on Create Thing. And this automatically generates a new thing using my parameters that I've just selected. It also automatically marks my new thing as a remix of the original thing. And this is happening each time someone uses Customizer. So yet another object is created that's noted as a remix. So to analyze Thingiverse, we started with a network analysis. So it turns out each thing page contains useful metadata about that thing, including its author, what it was remixed from, whether or not it can be opened in Customizer or was generated by Customizer, and much, much more. We also happen to have standard URLs that increment with each new thing. So to look at the next possible thing, we just look at the next thing ID. So to gather data, we scraped all possible thing web pages up through the most current thing as of when we stopped data gathering. And then after pulling the available metadata, we then created a directed graph. So we built a concept network showing remixing relationships between things. Things are the nodes. And remixing relationships define directed edges from the remixing source to the remix themselves. With this network representation, we can start to think about multiple generations of influence or of given things many, many remixing ancestors or descendants. So with this concept network, we can start to ask and answer questions about remixing behavior at a larger scale, and also it can help us focus on more interesting case studies. So let's dig into some findings. Biggest question is, what exactly does remixing look like on Thingiverse? And how might this compare to, say, SIGCHI? So in mid-July 2014, there were 350,354 things. I checked recently, and it's more than doubled since then. Of these approximately 350,000 or so things, a little under half were private or under moderation, which means that these things were either incomplete or for one reason or another, Thingiverse decided to moderate that thing. These things have no metadata. They're sort of blank. The other half, which is about 176,000 or so things, are public with open metadata. Based on this metadata, we identified almost 99,000 things that participate in remixing, either as a source, as a remix, or both. And just as a point of comparison, SIGCHI had 9,300 works in their network. So we're looking at about an order of magnitude larger network of remixing. It's a little tricky to see my image, but from these 98,776 public remixing things, we built our concept network. And this is what allowed us to quantitatively and qualitatively investigate remixing a little further. So first thing up, we use this to examine the influence of parametric tools on authors' contributions to and participation in this online maker community. So from its introduction in 2008, Thingiverse saw steady growth through the beginning of 2013. After the introduction of Customizer, the total number of things continued to grow quite quickly, with an increasing percentage of the total number of things coming from Customizer-generated designs. So about 3/4 of the public remixing things were automatically generated designs from Customizer. And these are being generated from a relatively small number of parametric designs, so under 2% of public remixing things. And this very small set of parametric designs are having a huge impact. So the top 120 most remixed things are parametric designs on Customizer with thousands of generated remixes. So our first question, who exactly is using Customizer? Anderson had talked about remixing as an invitation to participate, so we really wanted to see if Customizer was serving as that gateway to perhaps more advanced behavior. So first, we divided the authors according to when they participated on the site. So some authors stopped participating on the site before Customizer came out. Some were involved both before and after Customizer, but the vast majority of authors only participated on the site after the introduction of Customizer. So we focused on these post-Customizer authors. To understand the effects of Customizer on longer-term participants, we further pared down to the authors who actually produced more than one design. So these are authors who had an opportunity to evolve their use of Thingiverse across multiple things. And from here, we start to see some pretty clear divisions. 49% of authors who produced more than one design exclusively generated designs using Customizer. 39% of authors never used Customizer and only created original or sort of manually remixed designs. And the remaining 17% generated designs both in Customizer and created their own original or independent remixed designs. So that means the vast majority of these Thingiverse authors are either using exclusively Customizer or never looking at Customizer at all, and only 17% see both sides of remixing on Thingiverse. So given that Customizer is addressing a separate audience, do Customizer-generated designs build the same community and user activity as non-Customizer remixes? So as we see here, this is the number of views per thing and downloads per thing. We see a sizable number of views and downloads for original and remixed designs. However, parametric designs that can be customized, well, they see similar user activity. However, generated designs barely register any views or downloads. So a typical generated design is viewed once, downloaded once, and never heard from again. So what's important to note here is that we're actually seeing these two separate communities happening on Thingiverse. There's the users who are going to Customizer and staying within that nice customizable way of playing with designs, and there's the ones who stay away from Customizer and just do their own remixing. And it's important to note that yes, Customizer is very powerful. People are generating thousands of designs with it, but it's not exactly producing the type of behavior we think about when we think about rich remixing communities. While this might seem a little discouraging, this is also a huge opportunity for design. This is just simply one way that Thingiverse happens to have implemented customization. So let's now focus on the side of Thingiverse outside of Customizer. We were particularly interested in what makes remixes successful and what it means to be successful at remixing in Thingiverse in the first place. So we define successful designs as those that benefit from the influence of others, those that are themselves influential across many designs, and those that benefit from many generations of remixed designs. So, excluding Customizer, we sampled the 40 things with the most sources, 40 things with the most remixes, and the 40 longest chains of remixing, so the 40 most generations. So in open coding, our set of successful things, we identified several categories of things that spawned extensive or extreme remixing. Of the 4 categories we discuss in the paper, I'll just mention 2 here. So primitive mechanisms are fundamental forms that have a functional role. So think about things that you might find at a hardware store, like hinges or screws or gears. Primitive forms are fundamental forms with an aesthetic, non-functional role that we sort of see reoccurring. So a great example of this, in 2011, comedian Stephen Colbert posted a scan of his bust on Thingiverse and asked for people to remix it. His bust became a primitive form and was remixed by others, often by combining them with other primitive forms that are common physical memes on Thingiverse. So we see these primitive forms occurring over and over and over, being remixed over and over and over. So these are things like a T-Rex, interlocking gears, or even the Stanford Bunny. As another example of successful remixes, accessories. Accessories are things that are intended to interface with consumer products. These are often remixed because they are known to physically mate or match to relevant geometry on an existing object. For example, this author posted a protector for the hot shoe on his Nikon camera, so that's the point that people attach their flash to. He later remixed his own design, transforming the protector into a GPS holder for his Nikon, which someone else turned into a more generic hot shoe mount, which another person then turned into a GoPro mount for their camera, and then another person turned that into a GoPro mount for a totally different camera. So this is actually a great example of the 2 ways that accessories are being remixed. One is that the verified geometry is being used to create new accessories for the same consumer product. Meanwhile, there's people who are using the same design idea and translating it to another product in the same category. So this is like the GoPro adapter that's being used for both a Nikon camera and a Sony camera. So all 4 of these identified categories are examples of Anderson's collaborative improvement of existing ideas or designs. However, this is assuming that things on Thingiverse are physical. When uploading a design, Thingiverse states that designs must represent a real physical object that can be made. But some of the most influential, provocative things are not physical. So the thing with the most remixed descendants, hands down, is a software library for OpenSCAD called write.scad. Write.scad allows users to add text to 3D objects. It's important to note that OpenSCAD is the primary software used to create parametric models for Customizer. So that means any Customizer design where the user can customize text or add their name to a keychain is probably remixing from write.scad. So this type of non-physical thing is massively powerful, and we wanted to look at the role of these non-physical things in remixing. So we created a snowball sample list of 55 non-physical things to see what they were exactly and how people were remixing them. So these non-physical things, turn out, are tools and techniques that help users throughout the design and fabrication process more broadly. So for example, fabrication firmware is updating the software that controls your 3D printer, and it might offer better performance and improve output. Reference 3D models may digitally reproduce the geometry of an existing consumer product, like an iPhone, and that's used to help develop accessories. It's important to note that this model is not created with the intent of ever printing out a fake iPhone. It's purely there to use that geometry for something else. And there's also people who are developing new fabrication techniques that introduce new ways of using, say, 3D printers that goes beyond layered manufacturing. So for example, these flowers are created using open form loops with a printer head. These tools and techniques are also being remixed, either in an application, being applied to a specific design or by modifying the tool itself. And this is yet another opportunity to highlight and differentiate between these forms of remixing. So in the end, sites like Thingiverse let people share and locally recreate the experience of making. You can follow my instructions and use my digital design, but ultimately you have your own unique experience physically creating something with your machine. As another non-physical example of this, Thingiverse authors will share G-code files. So this is the low-level code that controls the belts and motors on a 3D printing machine. Sometimes these G-code files are used to turn the machine's movements into an instrument that can play music. So for example, this thing plays its music after it completes a print job. Oh, hold on. Ah. So this is the ultimate example of making as performance. While it occurs technically it occurs at the end of a print job for Darth Vader's head, this has nothing to do with the physical output and has everything to do with playing with fabrication machines and finding new ways to experience fabrication and trying to find new ways to share that experience with someone else. So in our paper, we present many opportunities for design. We'll just highlight one, aggregating users' experiences. As we saw earlier with the customizer interface, users have no sense of what other people have done with customization, and so there's no clues as to what settings might be good, bad, or just not explored. So by adding subtle cues that indicate other users' settings, we might help people find better designs or even find an existing generated design that already works. And with that, we can move on to questions. Thank you.
Hello. I have a question. I've been looking at Thingiverse for a while, and I've seen some of the remix stuff, and I remember the whole, like, gangsta, leansta, whateversta craze thing. And one thing that struck me about it is that there seems to be a lot of remixing for like aesthetic, non-functional objects that kind of like celebrates the process of making things themselves. But it seems like the community on Thingiverse has had a hard time taking off with like community-driven design of things that are actually useful for something you might actually want to do, which is like a really big problem with 3D printing these days because no one really knows what we actually want to do with it, personally. And so I was just wondering what your thoughts were on like what it would take to like take these methodologies that people are developing in the community and actually have that be applied towards making things that are, you know, focusing on the output, making things that are actually useful. Like, is it the CAD tools? Is it the thing? Because, I mean, like, OpenSCAD is kind of, it's fun, but it's kind of hard. But, like, you know, how do you take somebody else's design? It's hard to download somebody else's SolidWorks model and actually, like, change it. But, you know what I'm saying? Like, so, like, what do you think about that? Because I'm really confused about it.
So there's two things. One is, sort of per the DIY tutorials, I kind of view Thingiverse as places where people post finished objects. And so one of the types of remixing that we see a lot of is assemblies and components, which are not very well supported. Open hardware projects currently are using things like Autodesk Fusion 360 or GitHub in another kind of awkward attempt to support this kind of thing. So yes, this is another huge opportunity for design because these types of more in-depth remixing aren't exactly the greatest fit for Thingiverse, even though we see them there anyways.
But is there anywhere where that's happening? Because, I mean, like, GrabCAD, it seems like more professionals are on there, but it seems like they're really focused on, like, making sweet renderings of things as well. And, like, is there a place where...
So Fusion 360 is the more professional-oriented one. GitHub also has a pretty high barrier to entry. So to my knowledge, I don't know of anything that's currently doing that. Like I said, opportunity for design.
Yeah.
The other thing that I'd like to note, though, is, yes, there is this big problem about sort of the short-term appeal of 3D printing. There's a paper that I cite in the paper itself that is a study of introducing 3D printing to high school students. And they show them a demo, and then all they want to, and the demo is making a keychain with their name on it, and all the students want to do is make keychains with their names on it, and make keychains with other people's names on it, and sell it, and that's as far as their imagination goes. So it's a little tricky to figure out how we can sort of take something like 3D printing beyond a novelty and actually create more interesting functional forms.
Interesting. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's give all the